Thank you all. We love you all. Thank you all, Wisconsin. It's great to be here. We have a great looking crowd here. Thank you all. It's the best looking group of welders and steel men and women I've seen in my entire life, I think. This is a sharp crew. Now, everybody behind me, I was told, volunteered to be there, and so you guys have to clap and cheer at everything that I say, and if not, we're gonna have to kick you the hell out of here. And a couple of them actually, and I'm not gonna call them out by name, but they were selected because they're some of the hardest working and best working people in this facility. And we just wanna say we're proud of you guys, proud of what you do, and proud that the tradition of Wisconsin craftsmanship lives on in this great facility right here today. Now, before we get started here, and I want to talk about the big, beautiful bill, I want to give a few notes of appreciation and gratitude. So, first of all, I think this is probably the third or fourth time I've been to La Crosse, Wisconsin. I came here a lot during the campaign. It was always great to be here, and I joked that you all would get sick of me, but I would come back as Vice President of the United States, and I'm proud that I got to keep that promise, thanks to you. So I want to thank Paul Bagnevsky. Paul, thank you so much. I got it A minus maybe on that pronunciation. He is the president and CEO of this incredible facility. We're so thankful to be here. I want to thank Jake Koshiol and the rest of the Tough Job team for giving us such a warm welcome here in Wisconsin. I also want to thank, and you heard Doug Burgum, our great Secretary of the Interior. How good of a job is Doug Burgum doing as Secretary of the Interior? Doug, thank you. Doug is doing a great job, but you heard him give a shout out, and I'm going to give another shout out to the great Representative Derek Van Orden. Thank you, Derek. Please stand up. Give it up for this guy. He works harder than anybody in Congress. He works so hard that he lost most of his hair, in fact, over his time in Congress. I'm sorry about that. I had to poke a little fun at my good friend Derek. But, you know, there are so many people who just show up in Washington. They go along to get along. They cast a vote or don't, but don't really do much else. Derek is fighting every single day for the people of this district. You should be proud of him, because I certainly am. Thank you, Derek. And I guess we got the senior class from Luther High School. Where are all the Luther High School students? Where are you all at? Thank you all. Now, have you all started school yet? Or are you playing hooky today? You have. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad the Vice President coming to town got you guys out of school a little bit. But let's talk about the future, because these kids are the future. We want to make sure that they have a prosperous American future to grow up in. And let me take you back a little bit to where I grew up in Middletown, Ohio, southwestern Ohio, where my papaw, and the reason I love the welders in particular is my papaw for 42 years was a union welder at a place called Armco Steel. And when I was growing up, Armco Steel had shed about 80% of the workforce that it had employed when my papaw was working there during its heyday. And unfortunately, it was one of the lucky ones, because a lot of the steel mills lost about 80% of their workforce. A lot of the steel mills didn't exist at all. And I think that what happened is that for those of us who grew up in those factory towns, we were so used to seeing those proud, big, beautiful factories, seeing the night sky lit up with that furnace. We were proud of what our parents and our grandparents made every single day. And of course, they were proud to earn the kind of a job that enabled them to provide us a good life. And what happened? Thanks to a generation of failed politicians and stupid decisions, those factories closed down one by one by one, and many of those proud towns that made us who we are, ladies and gentlemen, those proud towns became ghost towns. Well, not anymore. What the President of the United States was elected on a promise to do was to bring back American manufacturing, to bring back American craftsmanship, and that is exactly what President Donald Trump is doing every single day in Washington. How nice is it to have a president who, instead of rewarding companies for shipping your jobs overseas, rewards companies for building factories right here in the United States of America? How nice is it to have a president of the United States who instead of raising your taxes is cutting your taxes by historic margins every single day, as we just did. For years, American leaders would ask you to work overtime, would ask you to spend even more time away from your family, and every hour that you spent at the job, they would reach further and further into your pocket. How nice is it to have a President of the United States who cut taxes on overtime, because we believe that if you spend an extra hour at work, the government ought to keep its hands the hell out of your pocket. Is that right? We know about 5%, about 1 in 20 Wisconsin workers rely on tips to bring home the bacon for themselves and their families. How nice is it to have a President of the United States and Republican majorities in Congress that cut taxes on tips instead of forcing our waitresses and service professionals to deal with the IRS. We ought to make it easier for folks to get by, which is exactly what we did when we cut taxes on tips, and Wisconsin families are going to be the beneficiaries. What the working families tax cuts did is very simple, ladies and gentlemen. It let you keep more money in your pocket. It rewarded you for building a business or working at a business right here in the United States of America. It makes it easy for you to take home more of your hard-earned pay, and it makes it easier. If you're an American manufacturer or an American business, it makes it easier for you to build your facility or expand your facility right here in the United States of America. I happen to believe that it's the dumbest decision we made as a country to reward foreign companies with putting stuff overseas instead of right here in places like Wisconsin. Well, now we have a different president with a different attitude. If you're building in the United States of America, if you're working in the United States of America, if you're trying to earn a decent living right here at home, we are going to fight for you every single day. But if you build crap overseas and try to undercut the wages of American workers, you're going to pay a big fat tariff before you bring it back in to the United States of America. Now, I was talking with a Fox News host earlier, and I'm going to embarrass him a little bit. I'm going to make him stand up and be recognized. You guys know Will Kane. Will, a lot of us watch his show. He's doing a good job. You know, what I told Will earlier is that all these problems are interconnected. Why is it that we allowed these Mexican drug cartels to bring this poisonous fentanyl into our communities? Why is it that so many people lost hope and started taking that fentanyl? Why is it that we had a government that seemed to care more about illegal immigrants than they did about their own citizens? It's all connected, because when they shipped your job overseas in the last administration or administrations that came before it, what they also did at the same time is they allowed those cartels to come in to our country and take advantage of our communities. So what the working class families tax cut does is, yes, it gives you more take-home pay. Yes, it cuts taxes on overtime. Yes, it cuts taxes on tips, but it also gives our incredible law enforcement over $100 billion to get those drug cartels the hell out of our country once and for all. It's very simple. Donald Trump's Republican Party wants very simple things for this country. We want you to be able to earn a good living in your community. We want you to be able to walk down a city street in broad daylight without getting mugged. We want you to be able to take your family out to a nice meal wherever you want to without the fear of violence from criminals, whether they're domestic criminals or international drug cartels. If you work hard every single day, you ought to take as much of your hard-earned pay home as possible. And if you want to raise your children in security and comfort, you ought to send them to a school that gives them a good education instead of an indoctrination. These are very simple things, ladies and gentlemen, and all we needed was better leadership in Washington to deliver it. Now, Representative Van Orden will tell you this, but if you didn't know, that it turned out that we didn't get a single Democrat vote for cutting taxes on tips, cutting taxes on overtime, or increasing the child tax credit. Not a single Democrat in the House or the Senate could actually deign to vote for giving you more of your hard-earned money. And we got to ask ourselves why that is. Because as much as I am proud of what we've accomplished, it would honestly be a little bit easier, wouldn't it, Derek, if the Democrats actually worked with us instead of fighting us every single step of the way. And you're going to see this. We're a little early for campaign season, but in a couple months or maybe about a year, you're going to start seeing television advertisements. And you're going to start seeing Democrats lying about what's in these working families tax cuts. And I'm going to tell you exactly what they're going to say. They're going to tell you that this bill, which gives you more of your hard-earned money, that they opposed it, not because they want to raise your taxes, and they do, but because they're worried about your health care. They are so worried about your health care, in fact, that they want to give more and more of your health care to illegal immigrants. And that's exactly why they voted against this bill. I know we have this beautiful high school class back there. And I'll give you, just from a vice president to the high school seniors, I'll give you guys just a little bit of relationship advice from a man who's been happily married for 11 years. Find yourself somebody who loves you as much as national Democrats love giving health care benefits to illegal aliens. That's my advice for you. Because it is, as far as I can tell, the reason why the National Democratic Party exists. Do you know that this bill makes tens of billions of dollars in investments in our rural healthcare infrastructure, which was falling apart under the last administration? This legislation guarantees that hardworking Americans are going to have access to their Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid benefits. What this bill refuses to do, and what Republicans absolutely refuse to do, is to give your hard-earned benefits to people who don't have the legal right to be in this country to begin with. It is very simple. And if you want to protect the people's benefits, if you want to protect rural health care, if you want to make sure that whether you live in a big city or a small town, you have the ability to go and see a doctor, and that is exactly what we want to do, then the first thing you ought to be doing is making sure that the people who get federal health care benefits actually have the right to be in this country in the first place. That is the first and most important step. And that's what this legislation did. So don't believe the lies and don't believe the attacks. What we are doing with this legislation is giving you a tax cut and trying to rebuild the healthcare infrastructure of this country that got decimated under Joe Biden's leadership. But what we are also doing, in order to preserve the benefits that you paid into for your entire lives, is making sure those benefits only go to our fellow American citizens and not to people who ought to go back to their home country because they're here in this country illegally. It's very simple. And think about this. Think about the math, ladies and gentlemen. You cannot have these health care benefits if you allow tens of millions of people into this country who have no legal right to be here and give them those benefits. We were on the freight train to bankruptcy under Joe Biden's leadership because we had a Democratic Party that didn't care enough about this country to actually enforce our borders. And it's that simple. And so when I see the Democrats, I got to be honest with you, it makes me a little bit angry. When I see Democrats fighting against cutting your taxes and saying it's about health care, it's not about health care for you, it's about health care for illegal aliens. And we happen to believe in a different principle. You ought to keep more of your hard-earned money. That if you work overtime, you ought to be rewarded for it. And that when you pay into the federal system, you receive those benefits and not anybody who didn't pay into them to begin with. So, let me say just a couple more things and then I'll hit the road, but maybe I'll take some questions. Should we take some questions from the fake news, ladies and gentlemen? Would that be fun? Okay, we can do that too, but we'll try to focus on the local Wisconsin reporters first because I know that they're not fake news, right? We got good local reporters here in Wisconsin? I don't know, mixed reviews based on the crowd here, but let me just say a couple more things. So this business, this manufacturing facility, I think represents the future of American craftsmanship. And I was talking to the CEO and to Jake earlier about this, but you know, there's this attitude that some people have that manufacturing, it's the jobs of the past, it's the industry of the past, that it's dirty, that it's not innovative. Why I challenge any journalist to walk around this facility for 10 minutes and not realize that this is one of the most innovative companies in America, and this is the future of American industry, the future of American innovation, and the future of American manufacturing. They're using artificial intelligence in this facility. They're using robotics in this facility. They're doing things that, frankly, were not even possible 20 years ago, and they're doing them in order to build a great American future. We are practically a stone's throw away from a beautiful new bridge, a bridge that is being built with American-made steel from this manufacturing facility, because we have great American craftsmen right here in Wisconsin, and we ought to fight for them. And I know the people out in the crowd, the people standing behind me, there are stories of proud work being done every single day. There are stories of a good wage being earned that allows these folks to support their families. There's stories of products that exist in the United States of America that we need, that we absolutely rely on, that are made right here with American workers and American hands. That makes me so proud to be your vice president, to get to stand here, to get to see a little bit of it, to take a little tour, to recognize that the American future that our children deserve, that the American future that our children rely on is going to be built by and for American workers, and you guys are the proudest American workers in that tradition. So God bless you, and thank you. And these guys, they're proud of what they do. They're doing something amazing. They're doing something that can't be done almost anywhere else in the world. They're earning a good wage in the process. This is what makes America great. And I love my papa. I said he was a union welder for 42 years. He was a proud man. He was a hardworking man. But my papa, before he died, he used to tell me that, he didn't know that American manufacturing was going to be as strong in the future as it was in his time. And again, I love my papa, but I think that's the wrong attitude. American manufacturing must be as strong in the future, or America's future will not exist without it. Do you think that our kids are going to have a future if we rely on foreign countries to make everything that we need? Do you think we're going to have a future if the pharmaceuticals that we put into the bodies of our children are made by a foreign adversary? Do you think we have a future if we can't even drive over a bridge without asking permission from some foreign country? That is no way to build a future. The way to build a future is with American workers, and I'm proud that in Wisconsin that's exactly what we're doing. So God bless you all. And I want to say just one final thing, and I'm going to end this on a somber note. We've had some fun here, but I am very mindful of the fact that we're just a couple of minutes away from the Minnesota border. And of course, we had this terrible, terrible school shooting yesterday in Minneapolis. And I imagine, like a lot of you all, it hits pretty close to home, very personally, because though you may not know anybody who's affected by it, I think a lot of us know people who've been taking their kids in the last couple of weeks to their first day of school. And in fact, my son, my little 5-year-old, I love him so much, and if you're watching, buddy, Daddy loves you. He started his first day of kindergarten just 2 days ago. And again, we're very proud of him, and we love him very much, but I know that there are a lot of families who were in their first week of school just outside of Minneapolis, and that was pierced. That incredibly pure and wonderful moment was pierced by a very vicious and a very evil person. And so I just want to say a couple of things. The first thing that I want to say is, remember, we're an American family. And the people who lost children, they are your fellow Americans. And those children who lost their lives and lost their future, they are your fellow citizens. So think about them and say a prayer for them. And remember that they are as much us as our neighbors right here in this wonderful community in Wisconsin. And the thing that they need most of all is they need their fellow Americans to reach out and care about them. And I know that every single one of us is going to do that. That's the first thing that I wanted to say. The second thing that I wanted to say is, when I first heard the news, I was worried that the death toll was going to be higher based on what the media reports were saying. And right now, there are still a couple of kids, some of whom in very critical condition, who may yet survive this. And I think they would appreciate your prayers, and their families would appreciate your prayers as well. So if you are the praying type, I'd ask you to say a prayer tonight for those kids that are still recovering, that they may recover fully and go on to live a full life, the life that was deprived from a couple of their classmates. And you know, the stories, I'd encourage you to read some of the stories about what happened yesterday, about the violence, about the fact that you had 10-year-old kids laying over their friends to look after them and to try to protect them. And while yesterday was an unspeakable tragedy, I'd ask you to remember that we also saw the very best of the United States of America. And to every person who protected a friend, to every first responder, to every paramedic who made it so the death toll wasn't higher, we love you, we're proud of you, and we'll never forget the great American spirit that you showed yesterday. And on that note, there's going to be a time for politics, and there's going to be a time to figure out how to prevent this stuff from happening, how to make these shootings less common in our country. And I'm not going to speak about that now, but I would encourage you, the First Lady, Melania, who really has a very big heart for children, obviously as a mother herself, she put out a statement earlier today that I think is really worth taking a look at, because this happens too much in our country. And if you look, we really do have, I think, a mental health crisis in the United States of America. We take way more psychiatric medication than any other nation on earth, and I think it's time for us to start asking some very hard questions about the root causes of this violence. And I'm going to be part of that, and the First Lady and the President are going to be part of that, but that's going to be an American conversation that we're going to have together. But before we have that conversation, if you are the praying type, I would ask you to join me in prayer. I'm just going to say a prayer for the two little kids who lost their lives yesterday. And this is a prayer we say a lot in my church, and I've always found it very meaningful. It's very short. But eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. May the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. Thank you all. Now with that, I will take some questions from the reporters, but again, thank you all for having me, and thank you all for indulging that moment. I think it's important for our fellow Americans to know that we're reaching our arms around them and we love them, and you guys gave me the opportunity to do that, and so I'm grateful for it. God bless you. Questions?
Caden Perry, La Crosse Tribune, local reporter. I'm curious, a lot of investments in the steel industry in this nation, especially the signing of the Nippon and U.S. Steel merger in Pennsylvania, a lot of those investments seem to be going to the Rust Belt and major corporations there. Can you point to something in your policy that will help small businesses like this and others that are maybe outside of the conventional areas for the Rust Belt?
Yeah, so first of all, by ensuring that facilities like this have access to great American-made steel, we make sure they're never going to get cut off. And I talked to the CEO about this earlier. We make sure that they're always going to have the supplies necessary to do the business that they need to do. And that's a very important thing, because as we learned during the COVID pandemic, when you rely on foreign countries to make your critical supply, sometimes those foreign countries don't work. You can't depend on them. We can depend on our fellow Americans, and that's why it's so important, big corporation and small, to bring this stuff back to the United States. But you ask, what is going to help this small business? Well, first of all, the workers here, when they work an overtime shift, are not going to have to pay taxes on those overtime hours. That's going to help the workers and consequently the business right here in this facility. But also, you heard Secretary Burgum talk about this earlier. When a plant like this makes a big investment, we want to make that pay in the tax code. We don't want to penalize them for investing in American workers and American production. And the working families tax cut, you know what it does? It completely accelerates depreciation, so that when they make a big investment, when they buy a big amount, when they buy a big new facility or they buy a big new piece of equipment, they can immediately benefit from that in the tax code. And it's such a reversal from what we've had in this country for 40, 50 years, where we would penalize companies in the tax code for building and making in the United States of America. Under President Trump's leadership, we're rewarding companies in the tax code for building and making right here at home. Next question.
Good afternoon. Charles Benson with TMJ4 out of Milwaukee. As you know, the president this week signed an executive order around the National Guard. And so I'm curious if you can give us some more detail on that, wanting the National Guard members to be available for rapid mobilization and establish a quick reaction force. My question would be, would that quick reaction force be deployed to help with day-to-day police work, and would a governor, like the governor of Wisconsin, have the option to say no to any deployment nationwide?
Well, let me say a few things about this. First of all, the principle at stake here is very simple. Americans ought to feel safe on American streets. How many of us... How many of us have crossed to the other side of a street because there's a person on the street corner yelling and screaming at our kids or at our family? How many people have felt scared to walk down the street of an American neighborhood in daylight or at night because those streets are considered no-go zones? How ridiculous is it that we ever let there be no-go zones on streets paid for by American taxpayers? You bought those streets, you ought to be able to enjoy them as American citizens. It's very, very simple. So that is the principle at stake here. And in Washington, D.C., let's step back a little bit. Washington, D.C. got to a point where it was having a murder more than every other day. The national capital of the most powerful nation in the history of the world had a murder every other day, carjackings, armed robberies that rival literal third world countries, and the President of the United States said, this is America's city and enough is enough, and he deployed the National Guard to fix it. Now that was the right decision at the time, but I don't know how anybody can look at the results over the last 14 days and say anything other than thank God Donald Trump did what he did. Because armed robberies, carjackings, murders are down between 40 to 90%. Even the very Democratic mayor of D.C. said yesterday that she was grateful for the additional police presence because it made it possible for people, Americans, black, white, rich, and poor, to enjoy the nation's capital again. And that's what I want. I mean, all of you, Washington, D.C. is your town. You literally built it with your tax dollars. You should be able to come and go to one of these beautiful museums or see one of these incredible monuments without fear that you're going to get mugged. And that's what we have changed in just a short period of time. And you asked the Wisconsin-specific question. What the president has said is that, very simply, we want governors and mayors to ask for the help. The President of the United States is not going out there forcing this on anybody, though we do think that we have the legal right to clean up America's streets if we want to. But what the President has said is very simply is, why don't you invite us in? Is Milwaukee a super safe city right now? It's had some crime problems. It's a beautiful city. There are a lot of beautiful, incredible, hardworking people who live there, but let's be honest, Milwaukee has had some crime problems. So have other parts of our community. Chicago, I know we're not too far from Chicago. Chicago's had a lot of crime problems. Why is it that you have mayors and governors who are angrier about Donald Trump offering to help them than they are about the fact that their own residents are being carjacked and murdered in the streets? It doesn't make an ounce of sense. And the last... And the last point that I'll make about this, sir, is, I'm going to violate the advice I gave to the President of the United States yesterday, because we were having lunch yesterday and the President said, JD, I don't know how I did it. I have actually got the Democrats to come out in defense of crime. And it is the crazy, if Donald Trump came out tomorrow and said he really likes puppies, you would have AOC come out and say puppies are terrible. So you have Donald Trump, who has reduced murders, carjackings, and armed robberies in 14 days in Washington, D.C., and now you have national Democrats coming out and saying, oh, well, we love murders and carjackings and armed robberies. Why won't Democrats just use some common sense? We're going to disagree about stuff from time to time. I'm sure Democrats want higher taxes and I want lower taxes. We may disagree about some foreign policy issues, but on this basic principle that murdering people, armed robberies, carjackings are bad, wouldn't it be nice if the Democrats just worked a little across the aisle for once? Next question.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Matt Smith, WISN TV in Milwaukee. To what you just said, Milwaukee's mayor the other day said absolutely not to any talk of National Guard troops. Would the administration consider ever coming into a city like Milwaukee?
Well, again, we want to be invited into Milwaukee. We want to help people. We want to help our fellow citizens. And we think that if you look at the crime rates, if you look at the murders in Milwaukee, if you look at certain neighborhoods where people are unafraid to go out even in the middle of the day, we would love to come and help the people of Milwaukee. But the President of the United States has said he wants to be asked. And that has been his consistent line from the very beginning, that we have an incredible law enforcement capability in the United States. You know what's crazy about crime? Is most of the violent crime is committed by a very small number of people. When we talk about a violent crime problem, we're not talking about thousands upon thousands of people in Milwaukee. We're talking about a few hundred people who probably commit 90% of the violent crime. We would love to come in and help lock up those violent criminals. I hope the mayor of Milwaukee gets some common sense and actually fights for her residents for a change, or his residents for a change, because we would love to actually help cut down on the crime in this community. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Anthony DeBruzzi, Spectrum News, Wisconsin. Sticking with Milwaukee, but a little different. Yesterday, Governor Tony Evers requested a disaster declaration from President Trump after the historic flooding that we've seen in the Milwaukee area. So can Wisconsinites count on the administration for financial help through this?
Yeah, so obviously, look, we want to help people, we want to help our fellow citizens, and I know that Wisconsin has suffered some serious problems. I have not talked to the President of the United States. I'm not even sure that he's aware yet that the governor has issued that disaster declaration, but I will take that back to Washington, D.C. and make sure we respond to it promptly. Thank you, sir.
Hi, Mr. Vice President. Daniel Gomez, WEAU in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So I see that you've been touring around the country, visiting congressional battleground districts. No different here, Wisconsin's third. You're here also garnering up some support for Derek Van Orden. So my question here is, can we expect you again next year when we actually get to the midterm elections? And will you also address other issues in Wisconsin's third district, which include agriculture, childcare, healthcare, and all these other things that impact rural, hardworking, working class Wisconsinites here?
Of course. Well, do you all want to have me back next year? Is that okay? All right. Look, so long as the people of the 3rd District will have me, yes, I will keep on coming back and keep on talking about the issues that matter. You asked about agriculture, I think rural health care, and also child care. Look, if you look at the working families tax cut, there's a lot there for agriculture. There's a lot. For example, if you buy a new tractor, you buy a new piece of farm equipment, wouldn't it be nice if you were rewarded in the tax code instead of penalized in the tax code? Well, now, thanks to the working families tax cut, you are going to be rewarded, which is why the farmers were really big and supportive and behind the legislation. We had such great support from our farming community in Wisconsin and all over the country for this legislation, I think in part because it does a lot for our farmers. You asked about health care. Look, rural health care in this country is in bad shape. It was left in bad shape by the previous administration, and this legislation, the Working Families Tax Cut, has got tens of billions of dollars to shore up our rural health care system. It is so unusual to hear Democrats say this is going to be bad for health care when we're spending billions of dollars to try to fix some of the rural health care problems in our country. And by the way, has anybody been awake for the last 4 years? Any of these national Democrats? How was the rural health care system doing under Joe Biden when you had hospitals and clinics closing at a record and alarming rate? We're trying to fix that. We want people to be able to access to health care, but we want American citizens to be able to access health care, and that's what makes us different from the National Democrat Party. And I'll take maybe a couple more questions, then we're going to hit the road.
Hi, thank you so much for taking questions from us. My name is Laura Schulte. I'm a reporter with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. You've talked a little bit, about the disaster declaration, but I'm wondering, how long will Milwaukee have to wait for a disaster declaration from President Trump?
Well, if I understood the question correctly, and this is the first time that I'm hearing about it, we got the request from the governor yesterday. Is that right? Okay, so I mean, it's very possible that request has not even made it to the president's desk. I mean, these things sometimes take more than 12 hours before they get to the president's desk. So what I can promise you is now that I'm aware of it, we're going to take a look at it. We're going to make sure that it gets the review that it requires. And look, we love Wisconsin. We love all of our American citizens. People are struggling. We recognize that, and we want to figure out ways to help them. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, Adam Roberts, News Radio WTMJ, also out of Milwaukee. A follow-up to that question as well. I know that you still have time to make this decision, but can you explain why President Trump or yourself did not tour the southeast Wisconsin area like was done in Texas after their historic flooding?
Yeah, I can give you a very simple answer to that question is, if you remember the Texas flooding, the president did not show up until he felt like he could provide comfort and aid to some of the grieving families, but not actually be a huge distraction for law enforcement. I mean, look, it is a reality of the world that when the president or the vice president of the United States show up, there are a lot of Secret Service, there's a lot of local law enforcement. And I remember explicitly being in the Oval Office talking with the president about this. He said, I really want to go to Texas, and I really want to visit with these grieving families, but we can't do it until the local law enforcement says we can support this without affecting the recovery and other efforts. So we would love to visit, we would love to talk to people, but some of this depends on we talk with local law enforcement, and we don't just want to show up for a photo op, we want to show up and actually help, and that's what the President of the United States is focused on. Thank you, sir. And I'll do one more question before we hit the road.
Jeff Murdoch, The Washington Times. So there are plenty of people, there are scores of people still in jail that have been pardoned under President Biden's auto pens. Do you think they should be released from prison?
Well, I think that there's something weird about this auto pen, which is that you have a guy who even some of his own staff members said did not have the mental faculty to be president of the United States, okay? While at the same time, he allegedly signed a bunch of pardons, which we now know were signed by the auto pen. I think it raises a very difficult question about whether those pardons were actually legitimate in the first place. I mean, think about this. How can you sign a pardon? How can you engage in presidential conduct that's binding if your own staff members are saying, well, this guy wasn't exactly fit to be the president of the United States? So look, I'll let the courts figure this out. As the president of the United States has said, President Trump, we always follow the court orders and we always try to work with the courts. But I think the American people, far more than whether this pardon is thrown out or that pardon is thrown out by the court, let's step back and ask ourselves, how is it that the American media and senior members of the Democratic Party conspired to hide us from the fact that the President of the United States wasn't fit to do the job? This is about more than politics. This is about more than policy disagreements. This is about if you get a phone call at 3 a.m. and there's a national security emergency, does the person who's answering the phone have the mental ability to do the job? And if the answer is no, then all of us, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, have been defrauded. And I think the Biden presidency is a big, fat example of the American media defrauding the American people.